It's being called multipolar March. A new world order is rising in China as a new civilization state is at its center. We're going to see the monumental agreement that was successfully brokered over the weekend and what it means for the end of the liberal international order and the rise of a new conservative traditionalist age. You're not going to want to miss this. Now, if you're a regular to this channel, and if not, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. We'd love to have you as a regular part of our channel. But if you're regular, you know that we've been frequently analyzing over the last year the emergence of Russia as the first post-globalist civilization state. Putin has officially declared that Russia is no longer a nation state adherent to the liberal international order. Instead, Russia is asserting itself as what scholars call a civilization state. These are states that are redrawing their boundaries around ancient civilizational spheres like the Slavic Orthodox world of Imperial Russia and the rise of Hindu nationalist India under the BJP, which is also being likened to a civilization state. And I've made the sustained argument that you cannot really understand what's happening in Ukraine without understanding the rise of a new political order centered around this notion of a civilization state. And as it turns out, you're not going to be able to understand the new political order in the Middle East either. And that's because the biggest, most titanic civilization state of them all, China, is demonstrating itself to be a game changer in world politics like never before. Over the weekend, in what many consider to be an absolutely stunning move, officials from China officially brokered an agreement between the nations of Iran and Saudi Arabia to reestablish diplomatic relations that had been severed for decades. The deal reached in Beijing last Friday as both sides agreeing to reopening their respective embassies and exchanging ambassadors, which seemingly will bring an end to decades of proxy wars fought between the two nations, most recently in Yemen. In fact, official ties between the two nations were ruptured after the Saudi embassy in Tehran was ransacked by Iranian protesters angry at the mass execution of Shiite protesters in Saudi Arabia, an execution that included a very well-known Shiite cleric. The Saudis, of course, are predominantly Sunni, but they have a large Shiite minority, and Shiite Iran has been instrumental in fomenting sectarian tensions within Saudi Arabia. Well, with this agreement, that appears to be over. Now, it's no coincidence that this announcement of the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran comes on the heels of President Xi getting officially reelected for a third 5-year term as president of China. That's absolutely unprecedented. Chinese presidents generally only serve 2 terms. And this is a clear confirmation of what's been said of China's most significant leadership. While Mao made China rise and Deng Xiaoping made China rich, President Xi has made China strong. And that is exactly what we appear to be seeing here. In fact, it's being reported that President Xi is planning on making a historic trip to Russia just days from now, in what many believe to be an epic formalization of the alliance between these two civilization states, an alliance that's already, as we can see, radically bringing an end to the liberal international order and recalibrating that world order around these rising civilization states. So let's unpack that a little bit here. At one level, China's involvement in the Middle East is rather limited, right? They get oil from both Saudi Arabia and Iran, two of the largest oil-producing nations in the world. So obviously the last thing Beijing wants to see is a conflict between these two nations that would inevitably interrupt their energy supplies. But more than that, China actually has relations between these two nations. As you know, the United States has radically sanctioned Iran. It's cut off political ties so as to make brokering an agreement like this between Saudi Arabia and Iran completely impossible. Again, this is the State Department of the United States basically shooting itself in the foot, not recognizing this new world, a far more conservative, traditional, religious world that's rising all around us. Because many analysts are noting that what we're seeing here with this agreement is a clear signal that the world is moving eastward. It's increasingly turning its back on the liberal West and realigning around Moscow and Beijing as the centers of an already emerging world order. We have to remember the Western world at the beginning of the 20th century represented 35% of the world's population. Today, the Western world's barely 17%. By 2050, it'll be no more than 10%. Secular liberalism has been one of the driving forces behind our demographic decline, since secular liberalism necessitates the freedom not to reproduce. And as the world becomes more and more religious, including a neo-Confucian China and a neo-Orthodox Russia, increasingly nations are turning their backs on the old secular liberal globalist Western model and looking towards Russia and China and increasingly Hindu nationalist India for a new post-globalist order recalibrated around reawakened civilization states. And one of the biggest ramifications for this massive world recalibration is the question over the future of what's known as the petrodollar. And that looks like it's going to be an absolute game changer for the world order to come. And this is something you are not going to want to miss. But first, you can be virtually certain that the one thing that ain't going to change is the timeless value of gold and silver. As you know, patriots over the centuries have always relied on gold and silver to protect their assets during economic storms, and that is exactly where the amazing patriots over at Goldco come in. If you've got $50,000 or more in an IRA, 401k, or savings account, you need to protect those assets from bumbling Biden's insanity with the timeless value of gold and silver. Click on that link below. Talk to our good friends over at Goldco. They want you to succeed so much. They're offering you up to $10,000 in free silver if you open up an account with them. But that is a limited time offer, so do not wait. Click on that link below. Visit my special website, turleytalkslikesgold.com. Back in the 1970s, the end of the gold standard, the United States struck a deal with Saudi Arabia to standardize oil prices in terms of the U.S. dollar. In many ways, this deal, more than anything else, elevated the U.S. dollar to the world's reserve currency, since with dollars, you could buy oil and gas directly without going through some kind of exchange rate. So that's what a petrodollar in effect is. It's the pricing of oil according to the U.S. dollar rather than some other currency or gold and the like. Well, it's now being widely reported that Saudi Arabia is considering making a comparable deal with China. The two nations are currently in talks to price some of Saudi Arabia's oil sales in the yuan, that's the Chinese currency, rather than in dollars or euros. Now, this is coming on the heels of Biden recently begging Saudi Arabia to increase their oil production so as to bring down prices that skyrocketed because of Biden's blitzkrieg of sanctions against Russia. And Saudi Arabia basically told Biden to take a hike. Now, with Saudi Arabia considering selling China oil in yuan rather than dollars, against the backdrop of the rise of the civilization state, which is fundamentally dismantling the old neoliberal globalist order, we got to realize that it looks like Saudi Arabia, as well as, of course, Iran, are indeed throwing their lots in with this new post-globalist world order centered around Beijing and Moscow. Again, it has to be underscored here that with the potential for de-dollarization in oil transactions between Saudi Arabia and China, we're seeing nothing less than the liberal globalist order shattering right before our very eyes. So we'll obviously be keeping a very close watch on how things develop here. But I really don't see any way around the fact that with this Middle East peace accord successfully brokered by China and the new political and economic order that appears to be rising out of it, the liberal globalist order has officially collapsed. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You'll definitely want to check out my latest video on the woke Silicon Valley Bank going broke. All as liberalism implodes. You're not going to want to miss that. So make sure to click on that link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.